Presents. This is Roy Samuelson. Today we have Brandon Cole. He is a video game accessibility consultant and is back yet again. Thank you so much for joining us, Brandon.
I'm happy to be here anytime.
I always start what you love about audio description, but I think it's pretty obvious. Anything else you want to add to that definition?
Actually, yes. I love that audio description is transcending itself, essentially. Audio description used to be considered the thing on the movies and some TV shows now and then, but now it's not only that, it's in more places now. It's the thing on the movies, TV shows, and streaming services, and now it's in video games, and that's pretty cool. And that's kind of the thing that connects us as far as those two things. But I love the way that audio description is growing nowadays.
I love that answer. And we focus mainly on film and TV, but the crossovers, the overlaps are so clear. And there's also some differences with video game. Could you address a little bit about AD and video games to contrast it with film and TV?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing about AD in video games is so many more things have to be considered. Not everything is based on strict timing as it is in linear media. Sometimes you have opportunities that you don't have in linear media that you have in video games. For instance, video games are very dynamic. So in a game like Forza Motorsport, which I just recently worked on, there is audio description in that game that is based on the current weather on track, which is really, really cool. Weather and time of day. And the audio description will change based on those factors. And that's pretty awesome. And you can't really do that in linear media because nothing changes. But in video games, things change all the time. And so those things have to be considered, depending on the game, of course. There's some games that only describe the cinematic scenes that don't change. But as we move forward with audio description in video games, that is starting to change already, and very quickly, too.
It's great to hear about that nonlinear application. I know that still today, but many years ago, there was a super problem with having to opt into audio description each time. And I can't help but think about how that current weather, it's a default. After it's already set, it's set and it stays set. So it's exciting that technology is actually supporting our industries in a way that's helping our audience in a way that makes it as straightforward as possible.
Yeah, it's really, really exciting. There's other examples too. Mortal Kombat 1 has audio descriptions not only in its story cutscenes, but also in its big special super moves. The infamous fatalities of Mortal Kombat are audio described in full, with full detail. So you can imagine what that's like. But also, there's another super move that everyone has called the Fatal Blow. And the thing about that super move is it is kind of split in half. So half of it is done by your cameo partner, which is basically the person you go into combat with, and the other half is done by you, your character. The dynamic part of that is that the audio description does that properly. It is very, very carefully constructed to actually provide audio description for both halves kind of individually, but when they're played together, it sounds like one solid thing. It's really, really cool.
I can hear the coolest joy in your voice. And both of those titles, the Forza Motorsport and Mortal Kombat 1, just came out recently. These are super recent, right?
Yeah, these are within the past 3 months. Forza came out on October 10th. That one I know for sure.
Gotcha.
Mortal Kombat was September 19th.
In audio description for film and TV, not all examples, but in the majority of cases, those kinds of titles for the audio description are created a lot closer to the release date. If Forza Motorsport was released on October 10th, obviously the scale of your contribution in the video game accessibility side started years ago?
Years, yeah, over 2 years.
What's your favorite contribution that you gave that you can share with our audience in either example?
It's a lot. It's a lot. This is really kind of a generalized answer, but I think overall, the thing that I appreciate the most as far as my contribution is the fact that what we did overall is bring a genre of games to a community that didn't have that option before. There are racing games that exist. There are audio only games made just for the blind that are racing games, but they're much less complex. This is a full AAA simulation racing game with hundreds of cars. Is insane as far as the scale of the game. To bring that experience, that full experience from everything from purchasing your car to tuning it how you want to upgrading it with new parts. Again, apply that to hundreds of cars, creating millions of different variations and being able to race all of the tracks, being able to participate in multiplayer, being able to set up 24-person blind only races. The freedom that we've given people by bringing these features to this game, that is overall the best part of it, is that we brought a new experience to a community that didn't have that experience before. That's the way I organized my career anyway. So
yeah, and what a great comparison with this contribution, being able to see how this is finally coming together. That, like you said, the AAA games, that it's not segmented. It's like, oh, here's your blind game. That this is actually
Yeah.
the kind of inclusion that you've been working at. And let's go back to what I said earlier about asking for your favorite. As soon as it came out of my mouth, I'm like, why am I asking him that? Of course he's going to have hundreds of answers. What do you do when you've got so many things that you want to talk about when it comes to your contribution to accessibility consulting? How do you share this with your audience?
That's a great question, especially because I'm one of those people that if given the opportunity, I'll just talk and talk and talk about this stuff for hours and hours and hours because that's who I am. When I talk about my contribution to accessibility, I'll drill down as much as the person asking the question wants me to. I will talk about specific features, but I will also say, again, going back to my career goals, the way that I focus on things for my career, the way that I want to continue to achieve things in the accessibility industry, my goals are genre focused. They are experience focused. My entire focus is providing experiences that don't already exist. So I did the action adventure thing with The Last of Us Part 2 and then subsequently Part 1, which we could also talk about because a remaster of Part 2 is coming out. Anyway, did that. Um, did that. Now I've given them racing with Forza, fully accessible fighting game with Mortal Kombat. Now I want to do other things as I approach the continuation of my career. I want to give people a 300-hour role-playing game that they can lose themselves in for weeks and weeks on end. I want to give people one of those giant open world games like Assassin's Creed. I have a lot of goals like that I just want to provide new experiences.
I love it, and I'm hearing it. It sounds like a lot of the conversations are happening behind the scenes, and also, like you said, in the one-on-one conversations of how much do you want to hear from me? I'm happy to share. Is there
Right,
anything?
because I'll keep talking.
Yes, and in addition to talking, there's also other ways. Obviously, we've got previous episodes of our podcast. You've got your own podcasts that you've been a part of and that you've done. Is there any other
Yeah.
content that might be coming up in the near future that people might be able to dive into the world of your contributions as far as video games go?
I think so. I do plan on returning to streaming. I used to do a lot more video game streaming than I do now, but I will be going back to that, I think. I have some plans for things that I would like to stream in the new year. So that's one of the ways that I discuss and show my content to the world as well. Not just my content, just accessibility content in general. It's through streaming because streaming is a popular medium these days. And so I like to use that to show the world what blind accessibility is really like, especially in games. It's going to be fun.
And your experience has to be growing as well, too, in the sense of where you started. You had told me it was 6 years ago, and to today. Is there anything personally that you've gone through that is really working well for you as far as that role as a consultant for accessibility?
100%. Absolutely. My appreciation of the other side of game development, the actual development side of game development, has grown significantly. That's become a huge part of my work. It's also really affected my perspective too. I see the development side. So now I understand why some feature might get cut. I understand why some feature might not get in or might take a long time to produce. I understand all those things now because I've been on that side for a long time. That has really provided me enough perspective to not only answer some of the questions the community has as gamers, why aren't we getting this feature, so on and so forth, but also to help developers from kind of a more equal footing as I now understand why they make the decisions that they make. And I can help them make those decisions now with that behind me.
I love that appreciation of the other side of seeing how development works in your perspective. This whole podcast should just be called Nuance. Like every single conversation we have, it's this is not all or nothing thinking. That on all perspectives, from people who assume blind people are either totally blind or they have 20/20 vision. That I've been using the expression people on the blindness spectrum now, just to be a little more specific than the previous term that I was using, which was blind or low vision. That blindness on the spectrum allows for these other nuances. And I can only imagine that when you're sharing your perspective that you've learned from the development, that it's not all or nothing thinking. It's like, yeah, of course we recognize that this is an element that would be helpful, but here's the bigger picture that is happening that's got to be addressed. And the way that we addressed it is actually even better than what this limited form could be. Am I on track here?
I think you're exactly right. I think that's 100% true.
It's great to hear how you're able to use that perspective and appreciation. I love that you started with appreciation and then perspective when it comes to things that are working for you. And it sounds like your growth as a consultant continues to grow. That you're not at this point where, okay, now I know everything and I'm just gonna we're all set. It's I'm going to use the analogy of a football player on the major leagues is still working out in the gym in between games. Is there? Oh, games, different kind of game. Anyway,
Yeah, right.
yeah, go ahead.
No, you're right though, because the thing about this kind of work is you learn something from each developer because each developer has their own approach to everything. And even though I have that experience, that perspective, and that helps a lot, I'm always, always constantly learning as well. I'm teaching them and they're teaching me. It's a dual learning experience, especially with games like Forza, because just as a real quick tangent here, when I was working on Forza, when I first came into that game, that project, I was not a racing guy. I'll be honest. I really wasn't. Like, I wasn't really a fan of racing games, absolutely honest. I didn't know a lot about cars. I didn't know a lot about how cars worked. And I'm not alone in that. A lot of blind people don't. A lot of totally blind people are unaware of the nuances. You can talk about nuance of how a car works, how a race should function. For instance, the games that are made for the blind that are just audio only, they're made by usually very small teams, they're very small projects. They're just kind of there to provide an experience. Because of that, they're not full simulation experiences. They're not physics based, for instance. So I had to learn from my work colleagues on Forza that you have to slow down when you're taking a turn in a race, because I didn't know that. I actually didn't know that because in those audio only racing games, it's all about turning at the right time, but never ever slowing down. So it was a whole experience for me to learn those things while I was teaching them how to make a game accessible to the totally blind. So it's absolutely a dual learning experience. That kind of thing happens on every project where we're teaching each other the things that we know, the things that we understand. And I'm always learning something. Every project works differently. It's a great experience just to do this work all the time.
With the example of Forza, the physics that you mentioned, compared to what the racing games that you played previously, that kind of scope growth, that explosion of extra interaction is education. It's playfulness. It's fun. It's exploring. That it's growing the industry for blind players in a way that has not been done before.
It also kind of makes the blind gamers grow themselves in a way because they have to teach themselves new things too. One of the things that we had to stress a lot when Forza was about to launch was, hey, I think you're going to love this game, but there is a huge learning curve, because there really is. They had to learn. People that are unfamiliar with this sort of thing have to learn all the things that I had to learn while I was working on the game. And that took me years. So the learning curve was huge. But the really cool thing is a community of blind gamers who are into this idea, who are willing to learn this and willing to tackle that learning curve, sprung up around Forza before it even launched. And now it's really, really thriving. Like, people that have learned it, people that have kind of figured it out, are helping the others who haven't yet, helping new players as they come in. They've created videos showcasing how to do this and how to do that. How do you tune your car properly? How do you take a turn properly? All these things. They're helping each other. There are now people that are better at Forza than me, which I am happy about. I'm absolutely happy about, because what that means ultimately is that we did it right.
Going back to the collaboration that you had with the developers to now the collaboration that's happening among players themselves, it's
Yeah,
really exciting to hear that.
yeah, it's pretty special. I did not expect it. The day I got that invite to that Discord server that that community is based in, I was extremely, extremely happy. I'm kind of held up as a king there, which is pretty cool. It was a pretty cool feeling. I try not to. I'm humble about it.
I hear your humbleness, and I also hear the joy and pride, not in the sense of look how great I am, but the pride of being invited to that Discord server simply because of what the Discord server is discussing. Your contribution
Yeah,
to that's what I'm hearing.
yeah, that's exactly right.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, a couple things. First of all, I want to publicly congratulate you, Roy, on being the audio description narrator for the Last of Us TV series. Just because I'm part of that franchise, you're now part of that franchise, and it's awesome. So good for you. Um,
Thank
but
you.
also, you're very welcome. But also, I do want to say that I do have some cool stuff in the works. I'm actually in the midst of working on a book, believe it or not. I have been writing a book for the past year or so, and we just finished the first draft. We're now in the editing phase where things are going to be edited, more content might be added, but we're looking at maybe late next year the production of that book is going to begin. And it's basically, the idea is it is intended to be a resource for game developers to carry with them. The idea is, something that they can literally carry with them that will tell them how to make games more accessible to totally blind people. Of course, anyone's welcome to read it, but that's the intent of the book. and I'm really, really excited about it. I think there's a lot of really good content in there, and I hope people like it.
Wow, that is the best news. So good to hear. Late 2024, the resource for developers for accessibility for blind game. I love this. This is so great.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing that with us.
absolutely.
I don't know how to fast forward time for the next however long until that comes out, but if you can please create a button in one of the gaming systems so that I myself can
Sure.
travel to that future time so I do not have to wait.
I'm known for my ability to innovate, so give me a few days. You never know.
Brandon, how can we follow you if it's on the Discord server or social media or website, or what would you like our audience to know?
Well, my website is brandoncole.net if you'd like to check that out. Uh, if you want to follow me on social media, look for Super Blind Man. I'm Super Blind Man basically everywhere on Twitter or X, if you want to call it that. I'm Super Blind Man. On Mastodon, I'm Super Blind Man at peoplemaking.games because I'm in game dev, so that's the instance I chose for that. Basically, just Super Blind Man on YouTube, Super Blind Man on Twitch. If you want to follow any of my accounts, you just look for Super Blind Man. You'll find them.
Thanks for joining
Yeah,
us.
happy to be here.